All right. Okay, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, so I am Ellen, and I'm a community health coordinator at the Health Department of Northwest Michigan. So the Health Department of Northwest Michigan covers Otsego, Antrim, Charlevoix, and Emmett counties. We have 2 active coalitions between those 4 counties, and I am the project coordinator for RISE Otsego Substance Free Coalition. So the biggest town in Otsego County is Gaylord. So if you're trying to figure out where I'm at, I'm sitting in Gaylord right now, about an hour south of the Mackinac Bridge. So RISE empowers youth to achieve their fullest potential, and through education, we have the power to reduce youth alcohol, marijuana, nicotine, and other drug use in Otsego County. Together, we can provide students, parents, and educators resources and information to create community-level change. And if you're interested, you can check out our website or kind of save that for yourself to look at. When I took on this role about 1.5 years ago, I felt most connected to this community-level change. I was born and raised in Gaylord. I left, for about 15 years, and then ultimately decided that this is where I wanted to raise my family. And anyone who has, left and come back, or even just once you grow up, you start to see your community from a different point of view, or a different lens. And I just really got hung up on this create community level change. When Mike did my introduction, he mentioned that I am finishing up my master's in social work, and a lot of my social work colleagues do kind of like that micro level social work, right? Where they're seeing clients face to face, and they're really like boots on the ground doing this work, this social work. I've always been very interested in kind of that macro piece. I like looking at a community from a outside or bird's eye view. And so hopefully I can maybe shed some light on that with some of the projects our coalition has going on right now. If you're doing coalition work, which most of you are, you know that we do a lot of, especially with youth, we do a lot of programming with schools. And I don't know about you, but schools can be this amazing resource, or they can be like, it feels like a business with a lot of red tape to get some work done. So when I was thinking of like collaborating and projects that I wanted to do with people in our community, I really wanted something that I could just like directly get to youth, like this hard to reach group of youth. And I didn't know what that looked like or what that was or how to do it. But I did know that I wanted to get directly to the youth and see what they needed. Additionally, another thing that is important to me is community service and what that looks like. So I wanted to marry together, the coalition work to reduce substance use, working with youth, and then also educating on community service and what community service means to the youth. I spent some time in AmeriCorps. You're not, I think probably most of you are familiar with AmeriCorps, but I did the conservation side of AmeriCorps, and it really taught me what community service was, and it really made me dig deep on what community service means to me. And so I wanted to figure out a way to share that with the youth in our community, through our coalition and through our work. So I have some learning objectives that I hope we get out of our next, 40 minutes together. So, and those are as follows: identifying local conditions and community problems. So getting an idea of, what is the problem and what can we do about it? Understanding the benefits of community collaboration. So hopefully this presentation is really highlights community collaboration and some of the things that RISE has done to, understand that the benefit in our community. And then finally, forming those partnerships with different sectors in the community and what that looks like. So I'm going to kind of work backwards with you guys, and I'm hoping it makes sense. You know, you do these presentations and you plan them out like for your brain. So if it doesn't make sense, please ask me to slow down or stop or something like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually talk about the project first, like the final project, and then I'm going to work backwards of how we got there. It's going to work. Okay. So RISE is working with some community partners right now on a street art workshop series. And this workshop series invites youth ages 12 to 20 to participate every other Tuesday from 3 to 5 in a workshop series. So so it's a 10-class contemporary street art workshop series to provide local youth an opportunity to engage in a community mural, progressively building from an understanding of what street art is towards developing skills. Artists will engage students in a variety of projects. Students will work with professional artists to incorporate their skills into a community mural at the Gaylord Ramp Park. So that's a skate park in town. Okay, I'm gonna go back to here. This is a prettier picture. Okay, so you're probably like, what is going on? It's a 10-part series. Each week, the students learn a different technique that can be applied to like muralism or street art, contemporary street art. So some of these topics are like the history of street art, finding your identity as a creative, perspective. So like when I first thought of perspective, I was like, oh, you mean bubble letters? And they're like, no, it's so much more than that. So perspective, shading, color theory, application. We had 24 seats available in the space that we're doing this workshop series in, and we had 22 youth register. So originally we had the age range from 14 to 20, and we found that we had a lot of requests from parents, oh, can my 13-year-old join? You know, so we did end up making it from 12 to 20 because we did have some middle schoolers that were interested as well. So 22 people youth registered, or their parents registered them. We are in the middle of the project. It doesn't end until June, as you can see on the slide. And on average, we have 18 youth show up each week, which that's actually pretty amazing. To have that many youth show up and continue to show up, like not just come to the first one. We've been really impressed, and we did have a couple people drop out and a couple people register a little bit late, but 18 has kind of been our sweet spot. We have one lead artist that leads that workshop, and then we have about 2 to 4 volunteers, and that was not something that we decided like, oh, we need volunteers. It was the art community being like, I want to be there. Like, I want to be engaged with this youth. And they just show up and they help and they walk around and they help that lead instructor. The lead instructor does change every week. So they are getting perspective from different teachers, which is really cool. Okay, before we talk about like, how did we get here? Like, where did this even come from, this idea and what we're doing? Does anyone have any questions so far? Yeah, Bill.
Great on the repeat and the participation. Are you making any contacts with people in the middle of the week to encourage them to come, or what's helping you to get such a high percentage of repeat performance here? That's great. It really is.
Yeah, I don't know. We have not been contacting them in between. We did have an incident that happened in one class, and so they did hear from us after that, but we have not contacted them in between because our numbers haven't dropped. So when they sign up, we did like a you can miss one, because it progressively builds, you know, on the education does. And so they kind of have it like you're allowed to have one absence in the 10-week series, or reach out to us if something else comes up. I think what has really helped us is the uniqueness of the project, and we're reaching a group of individuals that in our area are often not reached out to or reached. So, but we are doing a mid evaluation, and that's coming up next week. So I'll have more answers, I think, after that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Great project.
And I do want to say at the end of this 10-week series, then the youth, they each get to put their art on a panel at the skate park. So that's like their final project. Okay, I'm going to continue on unless there's any more questions. Okay, so pictures. So this was a class, this is like the 4th class. You can see this is kind of our space that we have set up. The youth in here are doing perspective, learning about, so perspective is a 2D drawing that shows height, width, depth, and position in relation to a particular point, right? So if you're like looking at something, then it makes sense, like what side of it you'd be seeing. Okay. Or another way to look at perspective is a way of regarding or understanding something. I had a really big aha moment when this project first started. I sat in a room with 10 artists, and they were deciding the curriculum for this project. And I felt like my brain was going to explode. So I'm a list and numbers and bullet points, and like that's me, right? That was not the table I was sitting at. And it shed this whole new like light of perspective for me that I had to get like build relationships so that other people could put their input on what prevention and community service means in our community. Because how my brain works alone does not make community change. They need me, I need them, and I needed a shift in my perspective. So with the coalition, we have a really good adult committee that shows up every month. I'm the only paid employee of the coalition, and sometimes that feels like a lot of weight, right? I have to do all this work, I have to make all this change. And sitting at that table, I realized there are so many people in this community that I can tap into. And what's crazy, I was sitting at that table, and a month earlier, I didn't know a single one of those people. I had never met a single one of them, right? And now we were working together collaboratively. Okay. So here's some more photos. I think being able to share pictures is really impactful. This was on history and creating their identity. We have some photos of the youth in front of a different mural outside. They took a walk around the city to see some other artists' work in the town of Gaylord, which was great. Up in the top right hand, we have one of the volunteers. She's wonderful. She's a retired teacher out of Indianapolis, who retired just up in northern Michigan. And so she's helping as well. Okay. So this is the skate park. What do you think when you see this?
I mean, I personally see creativity.
Yeah, creativity. Cool. Yeah, there is some really right, like spaces. If you look in the bottom right, there's some planets, which is cool. There are a lot of artists in our town that also see creativity, and that's perspective, right? However, there's a lot of community members complaining. There was a city council with people on their back to remove the equipment. This equipment sits on county property, but it is owned by the city of Gaylord, which is causing conflict. It sits between a bowling alley and the Gaylord Sportsplex, which has a park and tennis courts and a ice skating rink and a pool, very like family oriented. And people were finding a lot of litter. And there was a lot of people talking about drug use and alcohol use, right? Like empty beer cans and little airplane shots and things like that. And so I want to show you kind of what the idea in the end is, because when you see creativity and you can point out creativity in a community, leaning into that, I think will always benefit the community, right? So the idea, the vision, if you will, is to turn it into a community mural, so that the families that are frequenting the areas next door feel welcomed and comfortable, and they can talk to their kids about art. And there's also people enjoying that activity of skating or BMX biking, and they can do so in a way that is safe. The other thing that we are running up against is like the stigma attached to a skate park, and attached to, you know, I clipped art that was not offensive, but there is offensive art also, graffitied or tagged in this area as well. So this is kind of the vision. Okay, I said I promised we would get to how did we get here. This is my working backwards. Hopefully it's working pretty well. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 3 things about how we got here. We identified a need, an introduction was made, and an idea was then formed. So who are the key players? The RISE logo is on the bottom, so that would be the coalition that I work for. Top right, that's the City of Gaylord. And then on the left, that is the Gaylord Arts Council. So our local arts council. So we all had this need. I'll talk about RISE first. So we saw that through, I'm looking at the far left, the skate park was identified as a risk factor through community assessments. So I did community assessments with our adult coalition, our youth coalition, as well as a leadership academy in Gaylord or throughout Seco County. And at every single one, the skate park was identified as a risk factor. So we kind of, our need then identified was to reduce substance use at the skate park and improve safety. So the City of Gaylord was receiving complaints about drug use and graffiti, and the city owns the park equipment, and the county owns the land that it's on. So the City of Gaylord, their need was to clean up the skate park and preserve the equipment. And then finally, the Gaylord Area Council for the Arts saw a need that they wanted to engage youth in their communities through art. Okay, so they had set a goal last year, this current year that we're in, to engage local youth through art classes, and they were having a hard time reaching the youth. So you can see where this is going, right? We all have a different need, but then this project fulfills all of them. So an introduction was made. On the left there, that is the Gaylord Arts Director. Her name is Lisa Marie Tobin. She's also from Gaylord. We had never met before. Our paths had never crossed. And then I'm on the right. And in the middle of us is a committee member. She sits on the Gaylord Arts Board member, and she's a RISE committee member. She came up to me one day and she said, I was at a board meeting for the Gaylord Arts, and gosh, I just think that you and Lisa Marie have a lot to talk about, right? There was no idea yet. We had never talked about the skate park other than through our community assessment. So I said, okay, will you arrange that? And she introduced us via email, and Lisa Marie and I started talking and decided to meet up in person and see if there was any way that we could work together. Okay. So that brings me to collaboration. We decided that we wanted to collaborate with each other. After talking with Lisa Marie, I learned that there was a city council member who back in 2008 led a project to save the skate park. The skate park was located somewhere else. They moved it, and ultimately a group of young people in the community saved it. They saved the equipment and found a new place to home it. Because where it was at, it was getting tagged a lot, and it was identified at the time as a place of underage drinking and other drug use. So they moved it next to our community center by the bowling alley because it's kind of almost like shielded, right? Like it was like this better space for it. And then 10 years later, or however many, 14 years later, we're seeing some of those same things, that same pattern, and that stigma on that lifestyle of skating, of street art, and things like that. So we looked into some funding, and I know a lot of you are recipients of the Prevention Network mini grant. Yes, some people, yes, $50,000. Okay. So I wrote for that grant with the help of Lisa Marie. She helped me write for it, and we wrote for 20,000 of it, well, 21,000 of it to do this workshop series and this final project as well. So we were officially collaborating together. And hold on, I gotta get my notes up. Okay. Collaboration is not always an easy process, especially if you are a control freak. Sorry, guys, I'm moving my screen around so I can get to my notes. I'm struggling with it. Okay. But collaboration is the process that makes it possible to reach a goal that cannot be achieved by one person or agency alone. There's a need for negotiation, agreement about the goal and the strategies, and then the partners work together by sharing expertise, resources, and responsibility for achieving the goal. I learned quickly that collaboration does not have to be 50-50 to be successful. However, it does require a lot of open communication. Lisa, Maria, and I went from being strangers on the street to, you know, collaboration to collaboration crusaders together. And part of that was our ability, or is our ability, this is the current project, to maintain this open communication with each other. We check in frequently. We find out what the other person needs or what the other organization needs. We also make sure that both organizations' needs are being met by the project on an ongoing basis. So if you look at this little picture here, you'll see this networking, coordinating, cooperating, collaborating, and integrating on the bottom. So I pulled this from actforyouth.net. This is a really great resource on collaboration, on community collaboration. So it started with this networking and sharing information, finding out how we could work together to enhance our community and meet both organizations' needs. It does take time and effort to develop a working partnership, and it can feel like you can do things faster on your own, right? I don't know if you've ever been there where you're like, I'll just do it myself because I like doing it myself because then I know it's done. Fortunately, Lisa Marie and I work very similarly, so it has worked out well. But it has taken time to learn to trust each other, to rely on each other, and to learn from each other that in the long run, this relationship is going to lead to long-lasting outcomes, positive outcomes. And then so time is on the bottom, right? And then there's this turf. So if you look at this purple triangle of turf, turf is that, like, are we going to work together to benefit, like we're both going to contribute to benefit the effort. So for us, it was engaging youth in a meaningful project that gave them something to do to connect with each other, teach them a new skill, teach them that their art and the way that they are is acceptable and is okay, and can also lead to community level change. It can lead to paid jobs. I mean, there's a lot to be taken away from letting kids lead into their talents, and in this case, that is that interest and talent for art. And then finally, the trust, right? So trust is on the top. And now that we're coordinating and working together and the project has launched, we're in this cooperating and collaborating phase together, and we're just building this trust that we have for each other through our organization. One of the things that I encourage you to do is take opportunities to collaborate with other people and meet other people. I have learned a lot through substance use prevention, and one of it is that I don't know anything and that there's a lot of people out there that want to and can help, but they just don't even know what we're doing as a coalition. And I can push our coalition information out there and invite people to meetings and do all those things, but if I am not sitting down and having one-on-one conversations with community stakeholders from different sectors and different parts of the community, then I'm not being responsible, I don't think, with my position. I think it's important to lean into other people and what they have to say and what they have to offer. And part of that is listening, right? So just finding opportunities to listen to other people and listen to what they are doing, even if you're like, this does not align with anything I'm doing, you'd be surprised. Like, if you would have asked me a year ago, did I think that we were going to do a community mural at the skate park and I was going to write for that grant and attend those meetings and engage with those youth, I would have been like, what are you talking about? And maybe you're still sitting there like, what is she talking about? But leaning into those relationships has proven to be really beneficial. It hasn't steered me wrong yet, so that's good. So for instance, our coalition we've only been around since 2018, so we're newer. I like to, we're like in toddlerhood of coalition world. And tonight I sit on a couple different committees throughout my community, and I was invited to a volunteer appreciation event. And I'm kind of going in with this idea that I want to sit back and listen to what other agencies are doing to see where there's like opportunity to connect and collaborate together. So instead of what I have found does not work for me, at least, and it might work for you, is if I just go and like spew all my prevention information because I'm passionate about it, I want to talk about it. That has not been like my best way to make relationships and connections, but sitting back and listening and hearing what people have to say about what they're doing, and then figuring out how like our values align, right? And how we can work together, and just being more thoughtful and reflective on what the other people in my community are doing. Okay, what are your guys' thoughts on community collaboration? What are like your holdups? You can just unmute yourself.
Any thoughts or comments about collaboration? May I just make a comment that I think you're right to go into a meeting and try to listen carefully and really listen. I think you will find those opportunities to collaborate. Ruth, you want to make your comment or just unmute, make your comment, or you want us to? Ruth says sometimes it's as simple as finding common language. Some
Yeah.
comments about the parenting tips.
Yeah, sorry, I can't see the chat. I don't know why. Probably because I'm sharing my screen. But yeah, I agree, Ruth, about common language. And sometimes that common language is just youth. Need to stop the recording. There we go.
I'm not sure what happened there.
Yeah, I like that, finding that common language. So I had to add this little slide in here of growing pains. And I have a 4.5-year-old, so this one really hits home, the let it go from Frozen. But that has been, since I've worked in public health for 5 years and just a 1.5 years in this role, and letting go of what I think I know, letting go of doing everything myself. And I know that I am not alone in this room of people who like to do everything themselves because, you know, we work in these positions. We're often one of just a couple people in our area that are doing this work. And we feel a great responsibility and a huge weight to ensure that we are getting things done. And the only way we can ensure that is if we do it ourselves and don't let go. But the truth is, when you start to let go, is when I think opportunities really present themselves, where you're going to find community members that can help you and that can aid in your coalition's mission and, you know, what you're looking to accomplish.
Ellen,
Go ahead.
I think we think the same about these issues. I'll try to remind myself of how much I don't know when I'm going to talk to somebody and how much I can learn from talking to a local coalition leader. And I was just talking to somebody last week. And again, when they were talking about, I think you spoke about this a little bit too, about the pressure they feel. They're the only one doing this in the county. They're new. So I said, you know, I always remind myself, we don't have to have all the answers. I mean, that's what the coalition's for. That's what your chair is for. That's why I have Barry. That's why I have regional reps and partners, just to remind myself that, you know, it's really not all on me. Yes, I'm the paid staff worker, but, you know, you have a whole team, hopefully, you know, so I just agree with a lot with what you're saying.
Can I add? I want to add an example to that. We have a project we're doing at one of our local hospitals, and one of the pharmacy persons on our team that is, you know, on our group that's working with the opiate issue. And I just said, hey, here's a project. And he's like, all right, he ran with it. He got the policy written, he got everything written. And all I did was be there support and help him. So I think you're right. It's when we let them do that, let it go, is when it really goes, because then they also get buy-in as well. So the question I have for you as well is, when you're having those one-on-one meetings, what are some preparation points that we should have besides going in the open mindset? Is there any other preparation that we should have when we're going those one-on-one? Because I think those are important. And it's easier now with Zoom. You can schedule those a lot easier. But what are some preparation points you believe we should have when we're going into those?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, and okay, to your first point, I do want to say, in this project, Lisa Marie has taken it and run with it. Like, I felt really married to the project in the beginning just because I was writing it down on paper, but I am not the person who is making this happen. You know, it is someone else who is doing it, which is great because I didn't write in staff time into the proposal. So it's good that someone else is doing it, but that just happened And part of it was letting her take that lead. And I think also by letting other people take the lead and like celebrating their leadership, you are building trust too. And so that you can continue working together in the future. You know, we should celebrate other people that also have these strengths to take on these big projects and make them their own too. And then as far as like preparation, if it's like a planned thing and I'm meeting someone for a coffee, I normally just do a little internet research of like what they do, and so that I can help speak their language. And I also would say, like how you said, you know, going in with that open mind, I try not to jump to conclusions before I meet with someone. Because that's how I like to jump to conclusions. Like I like naturally, I'm like, okay, what are we going to do next? But I try to see like where the conversation leads us. And I also have learned to go in with like low expectations, right? So I hold the coalition to a high standard, but I keep my expectations low because it's not always going to work. And just because I set up a meeting with someone or they set up a meeting with me does not mean that we're going to figure out some great, huge, big project to do together. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes it's just, that was really nice that we had coffee and a good conversation. And then 6 months down the road, they email you and they want to connect you to someone else because they remembered, you know, what your organization does. So those are the things I would say. If I can prepare for the meeting, I do. And I like to learn a little bit about them. If I can't prepare, then that's what I especially sit back and listen and ask thoughtful questions, and just really focus on learning to listen.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great question. One of the things too that I wanted to ask you guys is, you know, what has held you back from making these relationships? Okay, one of the things that holds me back from making relationships is that I feel like I have a lot of work. Like I'll get in cycles where I feel like, well, I don't have time for this. I don't have time to do another project. So that was something that was holding me back. And I've really learned from this relationship was someone else is taking the reins. And it actually took me less time. I'm putting less time, and I've regained some time back in my schedule because of this relationship.
Some other comments say mostly time, fear. And I definitely agree with you, time. And I also agree with you. You know, you might meet somebody or have a meeting, and then you're not sure what comes of it, maybe, or it's, you know, it's the first meeting, you're just meeting somebody, and then 6 months later you reconnect because something clicked about what you're doing or a connection. But I oftentimes I'll, you know, have a lot of meetings with people, and there might be perhaps a direction to go in, but because of time, it gets kind of put on the back burner, or just the timing's not right, or the readiness isn't there. But then oftentimes things change over time, and then you might end up reconnecting with that person or going back and have a more specific ask of how we can work together or something like that. Barry says, I like having an ask as well if a window opens. Yeah, and I agree with
Oh yeah, like kind of like knowing what you want to ask of them. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's a good point, in having that direction of like, okay, if the opportunity presents themselves, like what do I want out of this relationship, or out of this collaboration? That's a good point. I don't know who said that, but that's a really good point.
In my opinion, I think that's a lot of times what we do is we don't go in with any ask at all, which is okay. But I think when we listen, we have to have something ready, because I mean, I remember meeting with somebody, 10 years ago, like, what do you want? I'm like, I just wanted to meet you.
Yeah.
That would have gave me an opportunity. Now that I understand that that's a process, I think it's part of preparation too, is, you either meet with your coalition, or you kind of look at where your strengths and your weaknesses are, kind of doing that SWOT analysis, kind of seeing where you need people. I think that's an important part as well as preparation.
And like knowing like before you go into meetings, knowing the direction that your coalition intends to head, right? Because I might have some like really big thoughts on underage drinking, but then the data that we are collecting doesn't support, you know, these big ideas that I had. And so making sure that you like, you're well versed in your data and that you know where what your like sectors and your representatives on your coalition want out of that, because it's important too that it's like this balancing act of keeping everyone's needs met while also still expanding. And so Mike, one of the things, you know, you said is you don't know when it's going to come back. I remember when I first started this position and all 12 of my sectors weren't filled, and I'm like, I'm going to go get those sectors filled. And I scheduled these meetings with people I knew, and I couldn't believe it when they didn't want to join the coalition or when they just like never showed up again, right? And I'm like, well, we had this great conversation. You know, you could bring so much to the table for me. And I'm thinking of one in particular, someone who works for community mental health, and we just had a wonderful conversation, and then they didn't show up, right? They never joined. And about 6 months later, I got an email from that person introducing me to someone else at her agency, asking if I would do a lunch and learn for their organization and tell them more about RISE. And it's like, oh yeah, like prevention is the long game. And like you can get so excited about making everything happen right now because it's really fun when things happen right now. But still having those meetings and being okay with not getting the outcome that you wanted going into it, right? Like lowering that expectation, but still holding your coalition to a high standard. And holding other people to a high standard.
I definitely agree.
Is helpful.
I definitely agree. Prevention is a long game too. That's one of my sayings is I'm in it for the long haul. I haven't said it as much, but I always be telling myself or telling people I'm in it for the long haul. Things do take time sometimes. And I was kind of smiling as you're talking about some of this too, because I'm just reminded again of the same things that I go through where, you know, I'll be talking with a policymaker about some policy that I think is the greatest thing under the sun and present this data and this, you know, all the research behind it. And then they're like, they're not interested or they don't believe it or whatever the case is. And I'll walk away thinking, man, you know, how could they? I have to stop myself and remind myself, like, you know, we just met this person like 20 minutes ago, you know, for the first time. You should not be that surprised that they either one, don't believe you, or two, that you have to go back and tell them a few more, you know, more than one time. But I used to get kind of frustrated, just think, you know, after talking with them once, they're actually going to get it. But I always remind myself that no, you got to build that relationship. They got to learn, figure out who you are, trust you, and know that you're not just making up stuff. So again, I relate to a lot of what you're saying again.
Yeah, and I think too, you never know where they're at in their openness, like to receive your idea or your pitch. And I think if you're familiar with the 4 agreements, right? And one of the 4 agreements is don't take things personally. And I often have to remind myself of that because same thing. I'm like, I went into that meeting with passion. Like, how dare they not join my coalition and, you know, be the co-chair or whatever. And, you know, you have to remind yourself that like you are only in control of like what you're doing, and you don't know how receptive someone is to your idea, especially with prevention, because prevention can be a touchy subject for some people. It is stigmatized for some people. I mean, there's a lot of things that we don't consider, or that we need to consider, I guess, of considering other people's backgrounds when you're pitching them ideas or having these conversations. Was there anything else in the chat?
Barry said it can take about 7 times before buy-in. Prevention takes time. Prevention is a process.
Yeah, absolutely. So my last kind of like closing thought here is that, you know, where is this project going? What is the result? Well, it is ongoing. The Shoalition happened right smack in the middle of the project. So thank you for letting me share about a project that is underway and not completed yet. It has not been without growing pains. We've had things come up. We've had things we would have done different in the past. And, you know, Lisa Marie and I are just kind of working together to tease those out as they come. And it's nice to have that collaboration, like that partner, to work through some of those together. So our 10-week series ends June 21st. Then we do a 2-day installation project. So the instructors that taught the series, the youth will work on their panels. And actually, let me just so you have like a visual. Okay, so see in this middle picture where it says Mystic. So that is like a panel, one of those. So that each student gets their own panel to do their design on. So there's, I think there's like 28 panels. So 18 of them will be done by the youth. And if they have time, then they'll collaborate on the other pieces together, or the muralists that were hired will do the other pieces. Our vision, the artist vision, wasn't mine, for the final project is they came up with the theme of rebirth, which I think is just, it's so great with the work that we do. Sometimes in prevention, it's hard to think about prevention as like a rebirth, but also I wrote down some synonyms, not synonyms, like rejuvenation, restoration, renewal, revival, renewed growth. And I think those are just like really good reminders in coalition work too, is that rebirth mindset. Students and teachers and the muralists will work together to enhance the park at a 2-day event. And you know, their families are welcome to come, and we'll do like a ribbon cutting. And one of the muralists booked some music, some free music that someone's going to come perform, and it's just going to be like a big celebration. And we did plan rain days, because you just never know with the weather. In case it doesn't work out on the days we planned, we have other days scheduled as backup. And then also, I just wanted to point out that part of the funding is going towards security cameras. And the county has agreed to let us like tap into their system, since they own the property and the building next door has security cameras. So we'll just be like those security cameras will be an extension of what they already have going on. So that's just another great side partnership that's going on, where then we're also not in charge of like watching security cameras, right? It's already being taken care of. And hopefully that'll deter people from tagging the muralist work. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. Any final thoughts or questions? I think I brought myself right to the end.
We got a minute or so, any thoughts, final questions, comments? As far as a comment, I hope you will continue to, be involved with the Michigan Coalition to Reduce Underage Drinking, and update us during our steering committee meetings on how your project's going, and certainly look forward to seeing the conclusion, some of the photos and things.
Oh yeah, thank you. I would like to. And if anyone, I'll put my email in the chat if anyone is like interested in talking more about a project like this in their community, or has any, other questions. I'd be happy to entertain that conversation. And also, thank you, Mike, for allowing me to present, and, and all of you for attentively listening and participating. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for presenting. Like I said, we want to hear what's going on in Michigan, so we appreciate hearing the things that people are doing. So thank you so much. Any final thoughts, questions? I am going to stop